Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. If you've been following my channel at all, you know all the work I've been doing on this car. One of the things I did, I had the engine rebuilt by a motor shop up in Inglis, Florida, and I got the motor back in, I got it all hooked up, but it doesn't seem like it's running like it should. A couple of problems I found with the engine so far is I've got some valve stem seals that are leaking, and I was able to get the bore scope up into the exhaust manifolds or into the exhaust ports on the head because I had the exhaust manifolds off to remachine them. And 3 of the valves have oil on them. A couple of them are really bad, and the rest of them are bone dry. Now, my number 1 cylinder was fouling out with the oil. I did a compression test on the engine. It's got great compression on all the cylinders. It's real even, within 7 pounds total. I think my worst cylinder is 132 pounds. My best cylinders, which most of them were 140 pounds. But anyway, that's what made me believe that it's got to be valve stem seals where the oil's coming from, because I have good compression, so I don't think I'm getting blow by through the rings. So anyway, the one cylinder I had the biggest problem with was cylinder number 1. I had the stock AC Delcos, the R44 TSs, I think they were, or STs, spark plugs. So I went with a hotter plug, and that seemed to help it, but it's still getting oil in that plug. It's not fouling out quite as bad. Before, if I ran about 300 or 400 miles, I'd have to change the plug. It'd be fouled out with oil. So anyway, one of the issues I need to look into is the valve stem seals. They're supposed to be brand new. For whatever reason, I've got some bad ones. I don't know on the intake because at the time I didn't have the carburetor off or the manifold off to get down in the heads in the intake side. What I'm doing today is we're going to swap out this Quadrajet for one that a friend of mine, Lewis, if you want to watch his channel, he's got a great channel on Corvette, C3 Corvette stuff, and his channel is 76 Vet at YouTube. So just go online and look at him. He's got a lot of good videos, a lot of good information, and his car is awesome. He's got a 76 Corvette, and it's just immaculate. He's done so much work to it, it looks like a brand new car. Every little nut and bolt and everything, it's just beautiful. So anyway, he's got a carburetor that came off of a C3 Corvette, roughly I think 71, 72, with manual transmission. So he rebuilt it. He put it on a friend of ours, he's got a 73. He put it on his car while he was rebuilding our friend's Quadrajet off of his car. Ran great on his car. This carburetor here I purchased from a company in, I think it was Tallahassee, Florida, or Jacksonville, Florida. It was National Carburetor Company. And this is just a shelf Quadrajet. I wanted the electric choke on it. Mine has what they call a divorce choke, and I'll show you that when I'm putting the new carburetor on. But I couldn't use that carburetor. They said it couldn't be adapted to an electric choke. So I had to upgrade to this newer, I think this is like a 78 or something maybe. I'm not sure what it's supposed to fit, but it's supposed to be, they told me I'll just slap it on this engine, fire it right up, and go down the road. The only thing I might have to do is adjust the idle screw. And I've played around with this carburetor quite a bit, and I've got it running fairly good, but I still have, in the engine, there's like a little bit of a miss, you know? And a friend of mine, Jake, he's got one of the old Allen engine analyzing machines that they used back in the day with these cars to troubleshoot them. And we hooked it up last Saturday, and he ran a bunch of diagnostics on it. And what he finally determined is that there's something with the fuel delivery on this engine that's making it run like that. At least he's pretty confident that's what it is. So after speaking with Lewis about it, and he graciously offered to let me try out this carburetor that he's got. So I had to run into Ocala today on something else, so I stopped by his house and grabbed it. I just got back. I'm getting ready to swap it out now. So to switch out carburetor, especially if you're going from a Quadrajet to Quadrajet, everything pretty much hooks back up the same. It's pretty easy to do. Now, if you're going with something like a Holly, or a Eldebrock or something like that, the biggest change is the fuel line. This comes in the front of the carburetor. On Eldebrock, it comes in the back. Hollies, I think they've got dual bowls on most Hollies, so you'll have a line coming in, it'll split and have to go to both bowls, the front and rear bowl. This, on a Quadrajet, they just have one bowl in the front that feeds the whole carburetor, so the fuel comes in from the front, from a hard line down from the pump down below. So I'm going to go ahead and start taking this thing out. What I like to do first, before I loosen the 4 bolts that hold it down, I like to break the fuel line loose and this rear vacuum line that goes to the brake booster. Because if you get it broke loose, you're trying to get broke loose, it's moving around on you and stuff, and you don't want to damage these lines. Same way when I put the carburetor back on, I'll show you I drop it down on here. Before I can put these 4 bolts in, I get these 2 lines started on it, and just screwed in. You don't have to tighten them all the way down, just screw them in by hand. And then you can kind of move it around, get the bolts in, get it tightened down, and then come back and tighten these. So you don't have to worry about cross thread, never getting the flange a little crooked in there and then it leaks. So you just want to keep that in mind when you're working with this. You definitely don't want to damage your fuel line or your vacuum line. Everything else is pretty easy to disconnect. You got, on this particular one, I got electric choke, so I just got this here. And on this other carburetor I got from Lewis, it's got what they call a divorce choke. The choke actually mounts to the intake, and it's a coiled spring. It's a bimetal spring. So as it heats up, one side heats up faster than the other on that coil, and that causes it to expand or open, and when it cools down, it contracts down and it closes. So, and then it's got a rod that goes up to the arm on the carburetor that operates the choke levers. So you won't need this electric choke on this carburetor if my divorce choke works good. And then you have to disconnect, of course, your throttle linkage, which is fairly easy. But let me go ahead and get the 2 vacuum lines broke loose. On this back one, okay, on the brake booster, you've got this brass fitting that screws into the base of the carburetor, and then you have the nut that holds the line in. The brass fitting is 3/4 inch, and you always want to use flare wrenches on these as much as you can to protect damage in those nuts. If you use a regular wrench and they're really tight and you bend them, you could actually crush them out around, and then they won't seal anymore. So you want to do that, and you want to put a wrench on that brass piece because you don't want it spinning and you twist your steel line. So you want it to stay stationary, and then just break it loose. It shouldn't be that tight. The main thing that seals on these lines is there's a tapered flange on this that goes against a tapered seat. So that's what actually does the sealing. It's not the tightness of the threads. You just want it tight enough to where it's sealing that against that bottom. You don't need to over torque it, or you twist something, break it, getting it apart. It's the same way on the fuel lines. So I got that one broke loose. Let me put the camera back. Okay. Now this one, the nut that holds the fuel filter in is 1 inch, and then the thread on the fuel line is the nut is 5/8. I don't have a 1 inch flange wrench, so I just use a regular wrench on that. And again, it shouldn't be that tight. And just give them a couple turns to break them loose. And I just put a rag underneath that, because you will get a little bit of fuel dripping out of that line for just a second. There shouldn't be any pressure there or anything. It's just what's running back out of the filter area there, which really shouldn't be that much. Okay. Now I'll go on the other side. I'll take the springs, the throttle springs, and the cable off. There's a little clip that holds that cable on. And once you get it off, you can put this clip back on, and it'll just snap back on when you go to put it back together. But I'll put that back on later. And then taking the springs out here. Okay, it takes a 1/2 inch socket to take the 4 mounting bolts loose. And again, you can see they're not really tight. You don't want to over tighten these things. You can warp the base plate on these and they'll leak. They'll suck vacuum. Man, it is hot today. It's probably 94 degrees in here today. Or outside, it's probably 100 in here. I've got a nice big fan, but I don't like to run it when I'm running the camera because it's so loud. I don't know if you would hear what I'm saying. Not that what I'm saying is that important, or if you want to hear what I'm saying, but just in case. Okay. And that rear vacuum line, it's all held to the carburetor with this bracket with the rear carb mounting bolt. So, got that all loose. Gotta pull out this. Oh, I gotta take the vacuum line loose from the distributor. Okay, should lift off of there. And that's all there is to it. Okay, and you always want to put a new gasket on here when you go to put a new carburetor on. You can see when I pulled it off, it kind of peeled it up a little bit, and you don't want to take any chance same way there. I'm going to take a scraper and scrape all that, whatever's stuck on there, off. And same way on the base of that other carburetor, but let me get a scraper. And scrape away from the, scrape away from the opening. You don't want that stuff to fall down in there. I mean, it's just gasket material. It just, I think it would go right through the cylinder and out the exhaust, but just in case. You know, you don't want anything but air and fuel going through your engine. And just make sure you got that good and cleaned off so that gasket seats nice and tight against that manifold. Okay, there's a couple things I got to take off the old carburetor. Okay, the three things that I need to take off my old carburetor to put on the new one is I've got this vacuum line that goes into the driver's side valve cover with a PCV valve on it, and it just fits on this front lug for the vacuum lines. Then I have to take this piece off right here and put it on the new carburetor so my cable will snap on. And then on the back side, I've got this brass fitting that line from the brake booster screws into for the vacuum for it. And when I take this off and put it on the new carburetor, I'll just barely screw it in, not much more than hand tight, because if you over tighten that base plate is so thin here that you could bulge that out, because that's a tapered thread. You could bulge it out and crack it there, and then you got big problems. So you don't want to over tighten that. And I always put a little bit of Teflon tape on that. I know people say, oh, you shouldn't use Teflon tape. As long as you're careful and you don't get it near the end of the fittings where it'll you know, flake out or whatever into the bore itself, it shouldn't hurt anything. And like I said before, there's a vacuum line, so it's sucking in down into the cylinders all the time. So really, the only place that Teflon tape would go would be into one of the cylinders, and as soon as it got in there, it vaporized. It wouldn't even last, you know, so it's not going to hurt anything, but you know, you just don't want to go crazy with the tape either. So let me get those switched over, and then we'll put the new one back on. Okay, this is a divorce choke. This surface here goes down against the intake manifold. It's got one bolt that holds it on, and then the rod for the choke off the carburetor hooks into that little hole there. And this is just a cover that goes over it, kind of protect it, keep stuff from interfering with the operation of it. So let's get climb this set back up on the car, and we'll put the carburetor back on. Okay, I've got the new gasket down there. It's just sitting there. This is just sitting on top of it. The carburetor is. And then what I'm going to do first is I'm just going to hook this up. So if I have to move the carburetor a little bit, I can. What you want to do is you want to put that down in there and kind of catch the end of that spring, and then just pull it up out of the hole a little bit till you can slide it on that lever like that, and just set it down in place for now. First thing I want to do now, or second thing I want to do now after doing that was the first thing, is I want to go ahead and get my line started here on the carburetor. Like I said, you want to just get them started in there, just so you know they're not going to bind up or anything when you try to get them in there after the thing's bolted down. Same way with the back one, just kind of wiggle around till you get it going in there, like that. And you want to definitely leave that one just a little bit loose in the back, because you got to be able to tilt this down and get this all lined up here like that. So now that we have our two lines hooked up that are critical like that, now we can go ahead and put the bolts in to mount it to the intake. So you just want to, the first one started down there. Okay, now I'm just going to barely snug these down, just hold it in place while I tighten everything else down. Let's go opposite corners. And then you see how this has got to pull down. So I'm just barely tightening these just to hold the carburetor in place. Okay, I'm just going to make sure that brass piece is good and snug. And then I'll come in here and tighten down this nut for the vacuum line. Okay, and the same way on the fuel line, stick a wrench on. Again, it takes a 1-inch wrench, 5/8 flange wrench for the nut itself. Just snug it down, you don't want to over tighten it. And you want to check this when you first start up, make sure you don't have any leaks. I have had these where you're still just a little bit wet, and you just turn them just a little bit more, and then they're good to go. So go ahead and put the bolt in for the divorce choke to hold it down to the manifold. And it's already hooked up, so we should be good to go there. Just kind of hold it square with the world. You tighten that down. And that should be a good tight fit against that intake, because that's what heats that band of metal up to make it start moving on you. So, okay, so next thing is the, hook it up. I am dripping all over my motor. It's so hot in here. Just make sure that clip's kind of centered over that hole so it'll snap over that ball. Okay, it's good to go there. Now we just need to put the springs back on. It's sweating my eyes. I can't see what I'm doing. Those are two springs together, and I got to get both the little wires on there. There we go. And those aren't quite enough for me. I got a pretty heavy foot, so I'm just putting one more spring to go from there to there. There. Okay. When you're first starting your car up, when it's cold, you want to press the accelerator to the floor just one time. Okay. That pushes this accelerator pump in to give it a shot of fuel. It also closes your choke again, resets it. I'm probably going to have to crank it a little bit to get it to fire this first time, because of course the bowl's dry in here. So I've got to get fuel up into the bowl, and then hopefully it'll fire. But I'm going to have to reposition my camera because it's right down against the fan blade. Okay, I'm going to try to fire it up. I don't have my vacuum line and my distributor hooked up yet, because I'm not sure where I need to hook it. I might just hook it into this port for now. But it should start okay without that hooked up. Every carburetor I've had, these Quadrajets, it's a different location to hook the distributor into. You want a vacuum line that's not drawing vacuum when it's just sitting. It's called a metered line. So when you start opening the carburetor, it'll start pulling vacuum through it. So I'm just going to leave that on hook for now. I'm going to hook a vacuum gauge into this front port where the PCV valve would normally hook into. Maybe. Okay, because I want to adjust the carburetor using vacuum, but I need to let the car warm up first, so I'm hoping it'll start and at least run. That's run really good considering I didn't tighten these down yet. I'm pulling about 14 pounds of vacuum there, which is okay. Some guys will get all the way down to 20 pounds. I'm going to try adjusting it and see if I can get it there, but I got to let the engine warm up a little bit first. I'm going to back it up about a half a turn on each side. Okay, I'm going to screw that one in all the way to count the number of turns, and I'll back it back out, and I'll set that other one to the same distance, and we'll see what it sounds like. About 2 3/4 turns out. That seems to be pretty good right there. I think I'll set them at that, and then we'll try a little bit and see how it runs. 2 3/4. Let's see if it fires right up. I got to figure out where to hook in my distributor. Okay, let's get it buttoned up and we'll take it for a ride. Wow, that runs like a whole new car. I don't know how well that's showing up. You can see that it's still moving just a little bit, but before it moved probably 50 RPM back and forth, sometimes more. So it's running a lot better. I still think probably what I need to do next is change the intake manifold and see if that makes a difference. But I'm real happy with the way it turned out. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Like I always say, if you did, hit the like and subscribe and share them with your friends. And we'll see you on the next video. Have a great day.